A long time ago, there once lived a king. He was not only wise but also virtuous. On the walls of his royal court, he had inscribed a message in large golden letters. "It is fate that decides everything." Years passed. The old king died, and his son became the new ruler, sitting on the same throne. One day, the new king said to his elderly minister, "I want that line removed. Instead, I will write, 'Man shapes his own destiny through effort. I don't believe in fate.'" The old minister humbly replied, "Pardon me, your majesty." But the late king was a man of great wisdom. He had seen and experienced much in life before he wrote those words. "You're still young. How much of life have you really seen to judge those words and erase them so easily?" But the young king remained firm. "Fine," he said, "then let me test it myself. I will find out what truly matters, fate or effort." The new king gave an order. "Find me the poorest beggar in the kingdom. I will give him wealth and riches and free him from his misery." Following the king's command, 3 royal guards set out to search for such a man. After wandering far and wide, they finally found a beggar sitting near the great city gate, begging on the ground. Every day he barely managed to get a few coins, just enough for one meager meal. That's how he barely survived. Without saying a word, the royal guards grabbed him and brought him straight to the king's court. The poor man trembled in fear. What crime had he committed that the king's soldiers had captured him like this? Crying, he said, "Your Majesty, I swear I've committed no crime." The king replied gently, "Don't cry. You have nothing to fear. I will change your fate. From this day, you will no longer live like a beggar. You will be a member of my royal court. You will get a house, a palace, servants, even treasures. Tonight, you will dine beside me." The beggar's eyes widened in disbelief. He thought, "Am I dreaming?" But no, it was real. He could clearly see the royal court, the king on his throne, the noble ministers beside him. At the king's command, the servants bathed him in rose water, dressed him in fine clothes, and brought him to the king's side. He was served a grand royal feast. After the meal, the king handed him a small pouch full of gold coins and said, "My men will now take you to your palace. Your room is ready. A soft bed awaits you. Tonight, sleep in comfort. Tomorrow morning, my people will dress you in courtly robes and bring you to attend the royal court again." And so it happened. But that night, even while lying on the soft, luxurious bed inside the grand palace, the beggar couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned for hours. Finally, he got up and stood near the open window. The sky was moonless, the night silent and still. And somehow, this grand palace started to feel like a prison. He felt like he couldn't breathe. That very night, the beggar quietly slipped out of the palace, carrying only the pouch of gold coins the king had given him. The royal palace lay silent in slumber. The guards were asleep. The streets are dark and deserted. Like a man in a trance, the beggar wandered off into the night, not knowing where he was going, not caring either. He just kept walking straight ahead. Eventually, he reached the edge of a river. But in the darkness, he didn't realize it was a river. He stepped forward and fell straight into the water. He sank. The night was nearly over. The river's gentle waves carried his unconscious body, along with the pouch of gold, to the bank. There, 2 fishermen were passing by, nets slung over their shoulders. They spotted a man lying motionless at the river's edge. They rushed to him, shook him, but there was no response. They assumed he was dead. So, they did what they thought best. They removed his fine royal clothes, wrapped him in a dirty, torn towel, and took the pouch of gold with them as they left. Morning came. The beggar finally regained consciousness. Slowly opening his eyes, he realized his royal clothes were gone. The golden pouch gone. He was wearing nothing but a filthy, tattered cloth. He looked around and whispered to himself, "Ah, so it really was a dream after all." Feeling lost, but somehow calm, he stood up and walked slowly back to his old place near the big city gate where he once sat and begged. He sat on the same patch of ground, and just like before, stretched out his hand to beg. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the king awoke in the morning and was informed that the beggar was missing. The king immediately gave an order. "Find him. I want him brought back to me." The same 3 royal guards set out once again in search of the beggar. The king turned to the old minister and said, "Strange. All I tried was to help him, to improve his life. I must know what happened to him." Eventually, the guards found the beggar, back at the same spot near the big city gate, sitting on the ground, begging as before, wearing nothing but a torn cloth. The guards brought him once again to the royal court. There, the beggar narrated everything about the sleepless night, the river, the loss of the coins, and how he ended up back where he started. The old minister turned to the king and said, "You see now, Your Majesty? Could you really change his fate?" The king, now both puzzled and challenged, declared, "Now I will test his life itself. Let's see whether fate can save him from death." The king ordered a large wooden box to be brought. Holes were drilled into the box for air, and the beggar was locked inside. Then the king commanded, "Throw this box into the ocean from the top of a high cliff." His men carried the box up the mountain and cast it into the sea. The box drifted with the waves, far, far away. Eventually, it crashed against a rock near the shore of a distant island, and the force of the collision broke the lid. The beggar crawled out of the box, gasping. He found himself on land. But it was a deserted island, no people, no signs of life. As he wandered in search of shelter, he came upon a huge palace. At the palace gate, something was written in large letters. "Whoever enters this palace shall surely die." But the beggar, an uneducated man, couldn't read. How could he know what the sign said? Unaware, he stepped inside. The palace was eerily quiet. No one was around. Room after room passed by, until finally he reached a grand hall made of white marble with jewels embedded in the walls, and in the center, a magnificent throne. On that throne sat a beautiful princess, crowned with sparkling gems, draped in a royal saree that glittered with golden embroidery. In her hand, a royal scepter. Surrounding her were ministers, noble ladies, and royal attendants. The beggar froze. He thought, "Am I dreaming again?" The princess looked at him and said, "Why are you just standing there? Come in. We've been waiting for you for so long." The beggar was speechless. "Waiting for me? A princess?" The princess smiled and said, "It is written on the palace gate. Whoever enters this palace shall surely die. Many brave warriors and noble princes came here, but the moment they saw that message, they turned away in fear. You are the only one who dared to enter." At her command, the royal attendants took the beggar, bathed him, and dressed him in royal clothes. They brought him back to the court, now transformed into a prince, standing before the throne, before the princess who had been waiting for him. The princess then said, "I had taken a vow that whoever dares to enter this palace, despite the warning at the gate, be he a beggar or an outcast, I shall marry him. I am the queen of this kingdom, and whoever becomes my husband shall be crowned the king." So the beggar was honoured and looked after in the palace. Preparations for the royal wedding began. A few days later, the grand wedding took place. All the kings from neighbouring kingdoms were invited. Even the king, who had once brought the beggar from the city gate and tried to change his fate, and later had him thrown into the ocean, locked in a wooden box, came to attend the wedding. But much time had passed. In his own court, he had by then replaced his father's inscription with, "Man shapes his own destiny through effort." When he arrived at the wedding and saw the groom, he was stunned. He immediately recognized the man, the beggar. The beggar shared his whole incredible story once more, from the palace, the river, the box, the island, to becoming a king. The wedding ended in grand celebration, and the king returned to his own land. His heart is full of questions. Back at his palace, he told the old minister, "That beggar, whose fate I tried to change and whose life I tried to end, today he has become the king of an entire kingdom." The wise old minister simply replied, "Now do you understand, your majesty, why your father had written those words?" The king lowered his head and said, "Yes, I do. Erase what I had written and write once more. It is fate that decides everything.